Evidence secured at Marker 4. Advise command we are holding the scene.
Copy that. It's getting heavier out here.
Imagine a place where every car is recognized, and every new face feels like an intrusion, a quiet sanctuary of food-urban life. A moving van appearing in the dead of winter doesn't just pass by. It sparks intense debate at the neighborhood mailboxes. The Catalina Foothills is exactly that kind of fortress, where neighbors have shared property lines for over 30 years. They recognize every dog's bark and know exactly which porch lights flicker out by 9 p.m. every single night. The sound of a specific engine pulling into a driveway at a set hour is the heartbeat of their collective security. They know when the rhythm of the street is right. Yet weeks before 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped, that rhythm shattered. A figure ghosted through these streets on multiple occasions without ever being caught clearly on a single high-definition security lens. No one stopped him, and no witness could offer investigators a sharp, usable image of the man's face. How does a predator remain invisible in a neighborhood where every resident is a self-appointed lookout? Someone meticulously mapped the utility lines, studied the camera angles, and timed a kidnapping for 2 in the morning. He bypassed a sea of Ring cameras and 30-year residents who notice everything, yet he remains a total shadow. This mystery isn't a dead end. It has a chilling explanation that is finally coming into focus. According to new reporting from NewsNation's Brian Entin, the Federal Bureau of Investigation may have finally cracked the code. This wasn't a drifter who got lucky, or a criminal who arrived cold and pulled off a miracle. Federal agents and the neighbors they've interviewed suggest a much more local and disturbing possibility for this crime. The monster may have been watching Nancy from the house right next door the entire time. The neighborhood. To find the truth, we must start with the target herself. Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman of routine. She is the mother of Today Show anchor Savannah Guthrie and a devoted member of her virtual church community. On January 31st, she enjoyed a final dinner with her daughter Annie and her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. Tommaso watched her enter her home at 9:48 p.m., the last time anyone saw Nancy safe and sound. The following morning, her virtual church pew remained empty, and the sudden silence from her home sparked immediate panic. Her phone, wallet, and keys were all sitting inside, but the front porch was stained with her own blood. The massive investigation launched that morning has failed to produce a named suspect for 51 agonizing days. Just hours after that final drop-off, a sophisticated operation that took weeks to plan was put into motion. The intruder went straight for the front door Nest camera and physically disabled the security device. Because the unit lacked a cloud food description and was later missing from the scene, the trail nearly went cold. Google technicians worked alongside 4 federal agents to extract data from the device, revealing the case's biggest break. They recovered images of a masked man in gloves, carrying a backpack and a holster, standing on Nancy's porch. Sources told Fox News Digital that these doorbell captures weren't all from the night of the kidnapping. In one frame, the suspect wears a heavy backpack and weapon. In another, his gear and posture are different. Investigators believe this proves the killer conducted at least one prior surveillance mission to scout the property. Sheriff Chris Nanos has fought back against this theory in public statements to the local community. He argues that without timestamps, any talk of multiple dates is nothing more than groundless speculation. Yet, the Federal Bureau of Investigation is actively hunting for proof that the suspect visited the home before February 1st. If he was there scouting, he had to be hiding somewhere very close by. Someone surely noticed an unfamiliar vehicle, or perhaps they noticed their neighbor's car was missing at the wrong time. 2 specific Saturdays in January have now become the primary focus of this federal kidnapping investigation. Law enforcement hasn't explained why these dates matter to the public, but their actions speak volumes. These timestamps keep appearing in FBI interviews and are now a central part of the Guthrie family's public pleas. The evidence surrounding these 2 days is the most critical information we have in the search for Nancy. January 11th and January 24th, 2026, the 2 Saturdays before Nancy Guthrie vanished. Brian Entin confirmed these dates are pivotal after speaking with a neighbor named Laura about her police interview. Federal agents sat in her home and spent hours meticulously reviewing her private security footage with her. They weren't interested in the night of the crime. They wanted to see January 11th and 24th. They searched the footage for a ghost, asked their specific questions, and left the neighborhood in silence. The FBI isn't just looking at the kidnapping, they are hunting for clues from two specific Saturdays in January. January 11th, a Saturday. January 24th, a Saturday. Entin mentioned it without guessing, and we will stay just as disciplined.
But one of the neighbors also said that investigators were also very interested in January 24th, which is a Saturday, which is the Saturday before Nancy went missing, which just goes back to, these are all weekends, okay? January 11th is on a Sunday, January 24th is on a Saturday, Nancy goes missing early Sunday morning on the 1st.
Mondays through Fridays have a predictable heartbeat. You have commuter traffic, delivery windows, and contractors coming and going. But Saturdays are different. Certain blocks fall silent at specific hours. The cars that are usually gone stay parked. The flow of people shifts entirely. If you are casing a house and trying to learn how a neighborhood breathes, a Saturday morning gives you a completely different profile than a Tuesday. A Saturday reveals who stays home, who leaves, and how deep the silence gets during a quiet night. Both of those dates were on the Bureau's radar for a reason. Early on, authorities made a request that spoke volumes. They ordered residents to hand over camera footage going all the way back to January 1st. Not the night of the abduction, not the week before. January 1st, 31 days before Nancy Guthrie was taken. That is the sound of an investigation communicating a theory without saying a single word. They are convinced this was being prepared long before the night it actually happened. They believe a digital trail exists in those recordings that goes back much further than any public confirmation. The Guthrie family's latest public statement named January 11th as a critical date, begging the community to check their cameras for that window. Families do not include specific dates in these public pleas by accident. They name those dates because the investigators told them to.
And it's very interesting to me that the Guthrie family is now specifically putting the January 11th date in their new statement. And trust me, this statement was definitely approved by the FBI and by investigators, and maybe even crafted in part by investigators. So there is nothing in here that's just sort of slipping in by mistake. I mean, this is all, I would imagine, very carefully curated, just like Savannah's videos.
The fact that it is a Saturday, just like January 24th, is a pattern we have to watch. What these two Saturdays reveal, combined with the new evidence investigators are weighing, is that whoever ran this operation didn't arrive in the foothills for the first time on February 1st. They were there before. And the one question this entire investigation is now circling is, where did they come from? Enter Aldine Meister. Here is what Aldine knows about her neighborhood, every single person in it. After living in the Catalina Foothills for nearly 30 years, she has developed a food day conscious map that only long-term residents possess. She knows who walks at dawn and which dogs appear at specific hours. She knows which cars belong. She does not need to think about whether someone is a stranger. She feels it. After 30 years, the rhythm of the street is inside her. Anything that breaks that rhythm registers instantly. Roughly 3 weeks before Nancy vanished right in that January window the feds are focused on, Aldine was in her bathroom and happened to look out. She saw a man she'd never seen before near Nancy's street. She described him in detail to Fox News Digital and reporter Brian Entin. He was young, certainly younger than the people who typically walk through that neighborhood. He wasn't exercising. He was moving slowly and deliberately. He was going slowly, she noted. When he reached the street leading to Nancy's, he took a long look. His hat was pulled low. She couldn't see him. He just didn't fit, she told the media. She tried to explain it, but it wasn't about drama. It was 30 years of pattern recognition working perfectly. The kind of instinct you only get from decades in one place. Everything around this man was the familiar landscape she had known for 30 years. He was not a part of it. She hadn't seen him before, and she hasn't seen him since. He appeared once, scanned the street, and vanished. She called the FBI after Nancy disappeared. She said it terrified her. When agents returned with questions about January 11th, she realized the sighting fit that window. It was after January 8th when her guests left and 2 weeks before the kidnapping. She had no video to give. Her cameras didn't catch that angle, but she described the man perfectly. She gave investigators what she had, and they listened.
I have a picture window in my bathroom, and I see all the people walking by in the mornings, and I noticed this strange guy with his hat down really low. He was kind of hunched over, not in, walking or hiking gear. He was dressed in kind of street clothing. So I thought that was weird, because that's not normal.
And here is where her story adds another layer. She was simultaneously pushing a separate concern she'd been shouting about for weeks. She told Entin directly, "The neighbors on the other side of me moved out. Like I said, I wanted them to check that empty house." 2 people carried Nancy's limp body away while the entire neighborhood's security grid went dark. She saw this coming. She flagged it. Now, the FBI is finally listening.
And then the neighbors next on the other side of me moved out. Like I said, I wanted them to check that house because
It's just been empty.
Yeah. So, but other than that, no one else is really talking about it.
Before we look at what the FBI uncovered in that vacant home, we have to reconstruct the night of February 1st. How did it happen? Once you grasp the technical breakdown of that 49-minute window, that empty house theory stops being a guess and starts looking like tactical necessity. The cameras went black. Neighbors across the Catalina Foothills told investigators their security footage from the night Nancy vanished was simply gone. No recordings. Not a glitch or a hardware failure missing. The files were marked unavailable when they tried to play them back. Police began asking if anyone saw weird internet lag around February 1st. They are still looking for those specific answers. Federal agents are now scrutinizing a smashed utility box located in the neighborhood, checking if someone hacked or broke it to kill the connection for the entire block. Was this a targeted digital blackout? As of now, officials haven't confirmed sabotage, but the forensic investigation remains wide open and very active right now. The FBI does not waste manpower on a random power box unless they have a very specific reason to worry. Compare those technical failures against the documented timeline. Nancy's doorbell camera cut out at 1:47 a.m. At 2:12 a.m., another sensor on her land picked up movement, but it failed to record any actual video. By 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker lost connection. By 2:36 a.m., a car was spotted on a Ring camera 2.5 miles away. Sheriff Nanos confirmed his team is fully aware of that specific vehicle. No one has identified it publicly yet. 49 minutes, from 1:47 to 2:36. In that gap, Nancy Guthrie was taken. Every camera failed or went dark. The signals just stopped dead. Every digital shield around her, the doorbell, the yard cameras, even the device keeping her alive simply snapped shut. 49 minutes of silence. Former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell studied the blood on the porch and told Brian Entin that Nancy did not leave that house on her own feet. Look at the blood droplets. There were no breaks for footprints. A person walking would step through the trail. She said, quote, "I do not believe she walked out of there." End quote. I believe 2 people carried her out. Period. The pattern fits someone being moved while unconscious, their head hanging in a way that let the blood fall straight to the ground. Total incapacitation. Neighbor Laura Gargano reached the same conclusion using basic logic. She has a security gate just like Nancy's on her own front door. Look closer. Her assessment, given directly to Entin, was blunt. If you have a gate like that, a heavy security gate out front, you aren't getting past it. You are never going to force that gate open. So, the man caught on the doorbell footage wasn't trying to break in. He was standing at the front door for a completely different purpose. He was waiting for someone inside to open up and hand Nancy over so they could move her. Laura looked at the physics of it. It is hard to move someone who is dead weight. Moving a 140-pound woman who is dead weight is simply not possible for one person alone. At the very minimum, you need 2 people, maybe more. A coordinated cell people inside, a lookout at the door, a getaway driver ready, a precision hit at 2 in the morning. That kind of timing doesn't just happen. How do you pull off a perfect kidnapping? You practice, you rehearse, you sit nearby and watch the target for weeks until you're ready. The FBI returned on March 17, 2026, 45 days after Nancy was taken. They walked back into that Catalina Foothills neighborhood with a very specific purpose. This wasn't a routine sweep or more door-to-door chatting again. They came back with specific questions about a specific house, asking neighbors what they knew about who lived there and exactly when they packed up and left. Brian Entin broke this story on his show. He confirmed the details through his sources before going live. His report stated, quote, "I have confirmed through sources that the FBI has been back in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood over the last 24 hours or so, hitting houses and asking deeper questions." End quote. Then he dropped the sentence that changes everything for us. One neighbor moved out right before Nancy disappeared, and the Bureau is digging into that specific situation. A neighbor who vanished just before Nancy did. Now the FBI is demanding answers. The wording here is vital because Entin was cautious, and we will be too. He made it clear. Agents aren't saying the empty house is the crime scene. He said they aren't claiming it's connected yet, but it is exactly what the FBI is focusing on right now. A monster lived next door. Enon has confirmed it. Agents returned to that block, grilling neighbors about one house and the people who stayed there. This is a live investigative lead that the FBI is now following with aggressive purpose. 7 weeks into a kidnapping with no suspect, this level of focused re-engagement with one property means everything. Agents do not return 45 days later to grill neighbors unless the evidence and sources direct them there. This is no guess. They are hunting a trail, just like the parallel inquiry they launched. But what were they really looking for? Many homes in the Catalina Foothills are currently under active, ongoing construction. The Bureau demanded the names of every laborer active on those sites in the weeks before February 1st. Bypassing permits, they sought the actual names of every individual worker. One neighbor told Anon that her friend, who owns a home under construction nearby, was directly approached by federal agents and ordered to produce the full list of everyone who worked on that project. This surgical specificity proves they are building a cross-reference for Bob Krieger. To grasp why this house matters so much to the FBI, you must understand the tactical role of a staging location in a planned abduction. Bob Keir spent his career as a SWAT commander for the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the same agency working this case. He knows this desert terrain perfectly. He understands how operations are built from the ground up and spoke to Parade magazine about the vacant house with tactical precision. Krieger noted that a house like the one being examined could serve as a vital hub. He called it a home base or staging location. Here is the operational reality. Using a nearby house provides an advantage that a simple drive-by can never match. It offers a cover story to be in the neighborhood without alerting someone like Aldine Meister. You are no longer an outsider. Why would anyone suspect a neighbor? You are a neighbor who belongs. The social fabric becomes your tactical cover. Krieger explained, you can track who leaves, which house, and exactly when. You monitor every car and window, including the schedule and habits of NY. You watch her return from dinner and see the lights at 9 p.m. and midnight. This creates a behavioral map built on weeks of sustained, close-range observation. Then, Krieger added the one detail that explains the mysterious camera blackout. He suggested a vacant home could hide actual surveillance gear, not just passive watching. This means monitoring equipment stashed inside the structure, recording without anyone ever knowing it was there. From a hidden post like that, a predator could map every utility node that a wireless camera or internet-dependent alarm system relies on. Once you have that map, you can time a disruption for your exact strike window. Krieger also offered a perspective for those frustrated by the slow pace of this investigation. New leads emerge constantly. Sometimes a neighbor realizes a forgotten sound was actually a crime. This is not vague comfort, it is the reality of how these cases actually develop. It is how minor details from week 1 become pivotal in week 7. The mosaic is forming. The car was gone. Laura Gargano knows what belongs here. She knows the rhythm of her street and the shadows of the night. She knows which driveways are empty, as she told Brian Entin in their interview. She has been the most helpful neighbor, providing hours of her own personal security footage. She sat with agents, scrubbing video from January 11th and January 24th. The Bureau has visited her home at least 3 separate times. She has been sharp and specific, noticing that something shifted near February 1st. There was a rental property nearby whose occupants she had been watching closely. She didn't track it consciously, but the street's rhythm had shifted. She knew someone was out there watching. She recognized what their presence looked like. Then, right as Nancy vanished, that specific presence was suddenly gone. She knew because the car was gone. Neighborhood absence doesn't register with drama. It is the silence of a driveway. A spot that usually held a vehicle was suddenly bare. Porch lights that clicked on like clockwork stayed dark. The person who was part of the neighborhood's daily fabric was simply no longer there. Laura described what happened next. She realized the neighbors moved out days earlier because their car was missing. She thought it was probably nothing, but decided to call anyway to let them know someone had lived there. And now, they were gone. She checked with several other people on the street to confirm her own observation. They had noticed it too. The vehicles were missing, and the entire property sat in total darkness. Once Nancy was gone, and the horror set in, she made that call. But the public record shows a discrepancy. Brian Entin's reporting confirmed through sources that the neighbor moved out before Nancy was ever taken. Before, never after. Laura's memory of the car being gone aligns perfectly with that general timeline of the kidnapping. However, reporter Dave Mack says a renter at a nearby home fled the scene immediately after the kidnapping occurred. Are they describing the same house from different angles or just slightly different memories? Or are these 2 separate properties entirely? Investigators are currently working to sort through these conflicting accounts. One thing is certain: the FBI is asking sustained, specific questions about this house, and multiple neighbors flagged it without any coordination. Aldine Meister had been raising this exact concern completely separately for several weeks. She told neighbors the people next door moved out and she wanted the house checked. 2 neighbors, 1 property, 0 coordination. Now the FBI is on site. But why was this house so important? Laura also touched on the raw fear that has settled over this entire community. She asked Brian Entin a question with chilling directness. She was uncomfortable because her neighbor was taken. She was terrified because Sheriff Nanos called the abduction targeted. Yet he never revealed what made Nancy a specific mark. She demanded to know. Targeted based on what? Was it for money? Was she chosen for being vulnerable or living alone? What was the draw? She needed to know if she was safe. She needed to know if her neighbors were safe. The answer that the predator could strike again offered her no reassurance. The secret lay in the house. That question targeted for what leads us directly back to the house next door. Selecting Nancy required the kind of sustained observation that only a nearby staging property makes possible. Now, look at the door. Laura's analysis of that front gate is a vital contribution to this investigation. Her insight proves a staging location was a tactical necessity for the kidnappers. She has the same heavy security gate on her front door as the one at Nancy's home. She told Entin flatly, "If you have a gate like that, a security gate, you are not getting into that. You are never going to break through that security gate." That means the masked man on the camera armed and tampering wasn't there to force his way in. He was standing there to receive Nancy when she was brought out to him. This was a coordinated operation where individuals breached the house elsewhere and moved Nancy toward the door where he waited. The man outside simply waited. When the door opened from within, he helped take her. That isn't a solo act, it's a team. A team requires floor plans, access points, and perfect timing. That level of preparation requires proximity. The staging location is what makes this crime possible. That is why the FBI is back, hunting for names and asking about every construction worker in the area. It speaks to the central question running through this entire investigation. Who had a legitimate reason to be in the foothills this January? The most chilling possibility is that the kidnapper lived right next door. Catalina Foothills construction sites provided the perfect cover for contractors, foodies, laborers, drivers, and permit inspectors, all possessing ironclad, documented reasons to linger on these quiet residential streets. They can stand in driveways, or walk the sidewalks near a home, without ever tripping the internal alarm of Aldine Meister, who spent 30 years memorizing every face in her neighborhood. Tool bags and white vans simply belong. But what if one didn't? You can haunt these streets for weeks and remain invisible just by looking like you have a job to do. The FBI isn't settling for logs. They demanded the individual name of every single worker and contractor active on those specific construction sites during the weeks leading up to February 1st. One neighbor informed Entin that a friend with a home under renovation was personally approached by agents and ordered to hand over the name of every person who worked on her project. They didn't want companies. They wanted every human being by name. Steve Moore told Entin this indicates forward momentum, not backward scrambling. His professional assessment is clear. From day one, investigators have treated this as a targeted hit, not a random crime. Collecting those names is the only way to reconstruct a granular, minute-by-minute timeline of who occupied that neighborhood during the reconnaissance window and cross-referencing them, name by name, against what security cameras caught on January Saturdays. If a name appears on a job site manifest, but that same person shows up on camera somewhere they shouldn't be, the FBI has their lead. This is the exact surgical comparison the Bureau is currently performing. But why go to such lengths? Look at this through the eyes of someone planning a kidnapping. You must enter the Catalina Foothills repeatedly without neighbors flagging you as a suspicious, recurring stranger who doesn't belong there. Using construction as cover is operationally brilliant. You aren't some creeper driving slowly through an intersection twice in 3 weeks. You are a laborer. You have a purpose. Nobody's internal radar even blips. You scout the target, leave, return, and disappear again, and no one notices a thing unless the FBI pulls every name and checks them against footage from January 11th and 24th. That is almost certainly the massive data operation happening behind the scenes right now. This level of coordination requires deep planning. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jason Peck provided the sharpest analytical lens for the evidence gathered so far. He told Fox News Digital, after confirmation that doorbell camera images likely show the suspect on multiple different days, indicating a surveillance visit weeks before the actual kidnapping. Pack linked those sightings directly to the broader investigative strategy. He was blunt. This is the hallmark of an offender who calculated their moves before they ever struck. He identified those prior visits that reconnaissance as evidence of high sophistication. Then he added something with massive legal consequences. Premeditation and planning fundamentally changed the case severity. This isn't a simple abduction if it was systematically mapped out for weeks. This becomes a kidnapping with documented, premeditated intent. That distinction drastically alters the charges and the prison time waiting for whoever is eventually caught. The FBI isn't just hunting for who took Nancy Guthrie. They are building a case for capital premeditation by documenting a timeline of preparation. They are tracing how far back the plot began, how many times they visited, and what intelligence was gathered, and by whom. Finding a staging property right next door to the victim would bridge that timeline perfectly. It would explain the January surveillance, the knowledge of camera blind spots, and the mapping of local utility lines. It answers how a man could walk these streets repeatedly without being called out as a total outsider. He wasn't just working there, he was living there. Or was he? Steve Moore offered a vital counter-argument to this theory of the sophisticated predator. He told Entin he doubts these people are criminal geniuses. Nancy is still missing, likely due to friction between different law enforcement agencies and pure, dumb luck, rather than operational brilliance. He put it simply, they just weren't all that competent. Moore's take doesn't actually contradict Pack's. A team can spend weeks planning and still be incredibly messy during the execution. They can't foresee a neighbor noticing an empty driveway and calling police, sparking a search of a previously ignored house. To the investigators, it doesn't matter if the kidnappers were masterminds or amateurs. What matters is where they stood and what they did in the weeks before February 1st. The puzzle pieces are clicking. Here is the reality. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old and has been missing for 51 days. She requires daily medication. There are still no confirmed sightings, no named suspects, and no known motive for her disappearance. A $1.22 million reward failed to break the silence. Pima County's Sheriff Department is throwing everything at this case. The Phoenix FBI isn't just investigating. They've discovered the predator was practically Nancy's neighbor. This past week, investigators swarmed back into the Catalina Foothills to interrogate the history of one specific property. Here is the terrifying picture they are painting. Weeks before Nancy Guthrie was snatched from her home, a professional predator or a coordinated crew marked her as their prize. Authorities haven't said why they chose her, but once the target was set, the cold-blooded surveillance began. This wasn't a simple drive-by. It was a deep-dive stakeout that required someone watching her every move for an extended period. Everything changed on Saturday, January 11th, 3 weeks before Nancy vanished, when something happened that investigators are desperate to understand. They've scrubbed every second of Laura Gargano's security feeds and pressed Aldine Meister for any detail from that specific morning. Neighbors were ordered to dig through their old hard drives, while the Guthrie family highlighted this date in their latest public plea. Then came January 24th, another Saturday, exactly 8 days before Nancy disappeared into the night. This triggered a second wave of targeted camera reviews, a second date that investigators believe caught the kidnappers during their final rehearsal. 2 Saturdays, both flagged as critical, both part of a reconnaissance window the FBI is now dissecting frame by frame. A man wearing a hat pulled low was seen walking past the intersection near Nancy's home during that suspicious January window. He moved with a slow, haunting confidence. He stopped to take a long, deliberate look at the street. Aldine Meister, a 30-year resident, didn't recognize him then and hasn't seen him since. He appeared, he watched, and then he vanished. If investigator Bob Crigier is right about a nearby rental serving as a staging ground, then after that long look, this man didn't retreat to a hotel in another town or a far-off hideout. He didn't flee to a car parked miles away. He likely stepped into a house right inside the neighborhood's own perimeter. He had a front-row seat to watch her lights flicker off and her car pull out, learning her schedule until he had everything he needed. On February 1st, just before 1:47 in the morning, he finally struck, and the digital blackout began. Every camera went dark. Nancy's doorbell lost its connection. Motion was detected at 2:12, but the system failed to record a single pixel. Her pacemaker recorded its final pulse at 2:28, and by 2:36, a vehicle was speeding 2.5 miles away in the dark. Savannah Guthrie's family issued a heartbreaking statement this past week, calling on the entire Tucson community and everyone in southern Arizona. They are begging you to search your memory one more time, check your cameras, your old texts, and your journals for anything weird around January 11th, January 24th, or those early silent hours of February 1st. The family's words are haunting. It is entirely possible that someone in this community holds a piece of information they don't even realize is the key. No detail is too small. This isn't just a family grasping at straws. They are speaking for the FBI, knowing the answer is likely locked in someone's forgotten memory. It is a detail currently unconnected, an unexamined clip, or a face in a camera frame that a neighbor hasn't bothered to check yet. It is the ghost of a car missing from a driveway that Laura Gargano noticed on a quiet morning before the world knew what that meant. Investigator Bob Crigier summarized the situation perfectly. New, viable leads are surfacing constantly, and someone nearby might have heard a sound they dismissed as nothing, only for it to finally shake loose. That one memory could be the single thread that pulls this whole conspiracy apart. 7 weeks in, this investigation is gaining speed. The focus is narrowing. The FBI is back in the foothills, asking about that specific house and those names, returning to Laura and Aldine with surgical questions. This is the most massive development we have seen in this case since the morning Nancy disappeared. They finally located his staging point. He was literally operating from right next door the entire time. Now the hunt is on for where he went next. When that contractor list hits a face on a camera, or Aldine Meister's detail connects to a name, when that dormant memory finally clicks for a witness, the trail will lead straight back to that house and that missing car. That is exactly how this ends. It won't be a sudden miracle. It will be the slow accumulation of facts that people like Laura and Aldine were already reporting and refusing to forget. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, call 1-800-CALL-FBI immediately. Visit tips.fbi.gov or call the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4090. The reward is $1.2 million. Someone out there knows the truth. It's still waiting to be found. We will be back tomorrow with the latest.